CyberHub Engage podcast is brought to you by CyberHub Summit. CyberHub Summit is hosting its second annual cybersecurity conference in Atlanta, Georgia on October 10th at the City Winery, featuring live cyber war games. Find out more at cyberhubsummit.com. You were brought on and you had to build a security team from scratch. There was nothing there pretty much. Where'd you get started? I mean, because that's most of the CISO's challenges is the first 90 days, right? Like,
definitely.
It's almost like the president. You're looking at it, you go, all right, we've got North Korea, Syria, Iran, right? The Germans.
Yeah, and the nice thing for me was John Deere started the company, 14 years ago.
Right.
By acquiring two professional landscape firms, one here in Roswell, right down the street. One of our locations is literally 2 miles from here, and another one up in Troy, Michigan, and they built it from that. And so when I started, everything security was based on John Deere standards. So the policy that I had to read, the code of business conduct, all the things that I went through as a new hire were John Deere. And so what we had to do is take John Deere and kind of figure out, from one of the world's largest manufacturing firms in the world, how do we change all this to be SiteOne and what we need going forward? So originally we tried to take it and tweak it, and then we're like, forget it. We just got to delete it, start over. And so from a policy, we started with policy, what makes sense for SiteOne based on our business and what we do, and went on into procedures, looked at the tools that we had. I'll say the nice thing was we were never integrated with John Deere when you think of the infrastructure. So the data centers were totally separate. We always had our own separate data centers, our own infrastructure. So a certain amount of basic security had to be there. We had firewalls.
Right.
We had VPN for remote access. But that was about it. Literally those two things. The service desk that managed all of our branches and all the associates are the same ones that would create users, delete users. A couple of network engineers, a couple of server administrators, the bare bones. So it was taking a look at that and then taking a look at, okay, as a company, we sell dirt and trees, but we do have credit card data, and we're going to go public. So I used those two as the foundation for everything that we were going to make as a requirement. Got to have, we can't survive without doing these things. But everybody knows in security that you can be compliant with PCI and Sarbanes-Oxley and still have massive gaps in your security, right? and huge exposures. So we just started with Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, and then we looked and evaluated what are the other gaps, what are the other risks. And I ended up partnering with a tool. It was a company that Sean actually signed up with before I started called Securus. Mm-hmm. It's up in Michigan. And they're mainly Michigan-based. They're starting to expand, but they had created a tool where you could put your objectives or your requirements into this tool, and you could base it on any of the frameworks that are out there. And the nice part for me is they were willing to work with us and kind of combine several things into one. And it uses a capability maturity model. So, trying to get to a 5 from a 0 or a 1. And the first time we scored pretty low. And literally every quarter we met with them, and quarter over quarter we improved our results. And we had a target that we had presented to the board of directors that was our target to get to by a certain date. And we were very close to it because, honestly, the executives supported everything we were doing. They knew we needed to do it. It wasn't a huge challenge if you needed the funding to do it because, again, they knew we were kind of starting with nothing but basic firewalls. And while they're not technology focused,
right? Because you guys are like blue collar,
yeah,
right. I mean, your executives. I mean, I was reading Doug, your CEO's portfolio. I mean, the guy was in the Army for a while. I mean, that's they're not exactly the tech savvy. We were talking about earlier in terms of a board.
I think the beauty for him is he learned through his experiences how valuable technology was. Now, we're not a technology company because we're not making software, selling software or hardware, but obviously we can't exist without technology. And the better our technology, the better we serve our customers. And the happier they are, the better we're going to be.
Well, I mean, it's SiteOne to me, when I read kind of like your portfolio, and I mean, again, no disrespect to Doug, he was not only an Army engineering officer, but the guy was at West Point as well. So props.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, are you sure you're not related?
I wish. I wish I had some of his smarts.
But there is a there's a key thing in understanding how vital security is for a company, especially, people look at it, and unfortunately you may experience this on your own, dealing with, different vendors and whatnot. Well, all we do is we bring you to dirt, we're not, we don't need technology. And you go, yeah, you kind of do, man. Everyone today has to be focused on technology. And so it's a definite challenge. I mean, when you're evaluating technologies, right, and as you were building having a brain fart today. I started keto yesterday, so I had to explain this. And so that's why I'm drinking this kind of fat water, trying to restore my my brain function, because I'm going through the sugar withdrawals.
That's rough.
Yeah, it is rough. But I'm trying to stay alive.
So, it's worth it.
Yeah, I want to live. Darn it, I was 180 pounds when I joined the service, and now I'm 250. I'm like, okay, time to fix that. You've let yourself go. Right. So, when you were starting to build, and what you were just explaining, hey, we didn't have anything but firewalls. What kind of framework did you look at? How did you evaluate technologies that fit within the framework? Why specifically did you choose that framework? A lot of questions, but.
Yeah. And honestly, we didn't adopt a single framework. There's so many out there.
Right.
And most everyone will tell you just because you adopt it doesn't mean you have to follow every single component within it.
Which I think's a problem.
Yeah. But I didn't want to adopt something that like the government uses that's 9,000 pages for our company. It just didn't make sense. So we literally created our own hybrid. And
very cool. Out of what?
Yeah, it was a combination.
Of how many frameworks?
I mean, if you include COBIT, COSO, including the PCI requirements and Sarbanes-Oxley, and even some ISACA stuff, probably 5 or 6. And there's obviously overlapping things between those. But what I wanted to get was kind of the basic blocking and tackling down to where we knew we were solid. And to me, I don't look at inside outside like I used to. In the old days, it was inside versus outside, and make sure you have a hard, crunchy shell. Well, now with everything being connected to everybody and all your third parties and your vendors, it's all the soft shell. I mean, a soft, squishy middle, and you've got to make it all solid.
Right.
And so that was our approach, was coming up with the tools that we need. And it was based on, it was obviously risk-based. Everything nowadays is risk-based. So looking at what our biggest risks are and starting at the top. And that's what the tool that we use with Securus allowed us to do. We put in all these different projects, desires, and rated ourselves. And then decided, of course, most vendors want you to be a 5. Spend the extra $4 billion to make it totally automated. Well, in many cases, that's not necessary for us. So part of the exercise was determining what level is appropriate. And to me, everything needs to be at least a 3. It's got to be documented. It's got to be repeatable. But 4 with some of the metrics and the reporting, that's where we're getting to now. But what I wanted to do, instead of taking anything to a 4 or a 5, I wanted to get everything to a 3. And so we did that probably 2 years ago before we went public. And since then, we've been working on dialing up more automation.
So trying to get more to the 4 and 5. Yeah. Do you think that automation is the future of security?
I think you're going to have it. And when I talk automation, a lot of it is you look at identity and access management.
Right.
The fact that, for years, everybody's managed that manually. And for years, we've all had mistakes. I mean, humans are going to make mistakes. Computers make mistakes, but not nearly as many as we make.
Right.
So one of our challenges is we have seasonal associates that'll work in the busy season for us, and then they'll go away, and then they'll come back the next year. So all the accounts, all the access they had, how do we manage that? Do we delete it? Do we just disable it and then bring it back on when they come back on? Because it's not always the same people. So one of the unique challenges here was that literally we could go up 500 or more associates in the spring and summer, and then they would go away in the fall and winter. And how to do that without missing people and having accounts that are out there that are active, that aren't being used, that are just targets for the bad guys to use, or for the guy that left to still try to log in, when he left the company. So moving to identity and access management, for us, it was Okta to create that and make it automated. So it's tied to HR. It's tied to them getting paid.
Right.
Now it just happens automatically.
So when HR disables someone, essentially takes away their whole.
Right.
So they don't have to send an email to security like, hey, we terminated, John Smith.
Yeah. And today we're doing that, and we're implementing Okta at this time to get to the point where it'll be automated.
Automated so that it's, one access. You hope that HR doesn't fire the wrong person and disable access to the wrong person.
Ironically, it's faster if they do it when you have something like that in place than it is now, because now it's all manual. So they deleted the manually. Now they go re-add everything manually. When if they did it through a tool such as Okta, it's just re-enable them, recreate them, and have them be recreated throughout the system, because it's based on their access is based on their role. And so because you're in finance, you're going to get access to all of our finance tools and the core things.
Right. Do you find that, as you're evaluating different technologies that are out there today, is there anything specifically that you look at and you go, this is the future of cyber or information security? I mean, are you looking at one specific technology differently than others, or do you evaluate them all the same?
I don't think I look at them significantly different. I mean, if it's a completely different tool, yes. But I'm looking at something that I think is going to be working for the next 5 years, which in today's world, that's tough.
Right.
I mean, if you look at antivirus alone, the way antivirus used to work and the way it's working now, and I think that's one of the challenges is when you get with one of the larger vendors that's been around for a long time, and they're not necessarily doing the new and innovative things as fast as these new companies are. What do you do? And that's one of the challenges we're looking at right now, where we have a Symantec, but there's companies like Carbon Black and others that are doing things that are cutting edge. And I personally don't like to be on the cutting edge or the bleeding edge, because they're really close together.
Right.
I'd rather see it work for a couple of years, and then everything we do with a proof of concept. So recently we went with Proofpoint for our secure email gateway, and honestly, I've been more impressed with them than any other company I've worked with in years, just because they scheduled the first quarterly meeting to sit down and talk about all of our settings and what we're doing, and then where we may want to think about making improvements. And
so they were worried about you implementing your product rather than just getting the paycheck.
And getting the most out of it.
Right.
So we got what we wanted, but then they came back and said, well, you can also do these other 6 things that maybe you haven't had a chance to look at yet, and helping us get those. And every quarter we meet, and they sit down and give us statistics from the last quarter and a nice report that lays out all the things that have happened with your VIPs, your Doug Blacks and others, and all the attacks that have happened on them that they've been able to thwart. And then they look at the tools and the things they've released and show us where we could use additional services that they have, not going and buying another product or module. I mean, that's always in there.
Right. There's always the sales pitch, right? For an additional $29.99.
But this is more the stuff that you normally don't get, where they're like, hey, you already have this. You can enable this feature, and here's what's going to happen. And, let's do it as a test and see how it works, and then we can enable it across the board. And they'll work with us from quarter to quarter to do that.
That's great. I mean, it's always positive to hear positive vendor stories. The CyberHub Engage podcast is brought to you by CyberHub Summit. CyberHub Summit is hosting its 2nd annual cybersecurity conference in Atlanta, Georgia on October 10th at the City Winery, featuring live cyber war games. Find out more at cyberhubsummit.com.